Greetings, Twitter. Back for round two. As you know, this is a week in review, and another topic that I wanted to touch on was because I found out this week that the lawsuit here in Texas for against SB8, which is the Texas abortion ban, took place. The hearings, I guess you call them, the actual case, and the case, as far as the hearings went about for basically 2 days, I believe it was 2 3 days, no 2 days, I think, and I tried to get a little insight into as to what went on in the courtroom, and unfortunately, the only updates that were available were through the organization that is actually in charge of the lawsuit against the state of Texas, which is Centers for Reproduction, or on their Twitter, because they were doing live updates. All the live updates that they were giving, I wish they could have been a little more informative and a little more frequent, not every 2 hours like the ones yesterday, unfortunately. Because I believe that a lot of people, especially women who are going through the same issues as these women that were fighting in court, I think they would have been more appreciative of as much information that could be given to them as possible, as well as the public in general that is actually watching this specific lawsuit as it's playing out. And but from the little information that was being relayed, the case pretty much, as far as the plaintiff was concerned, was straightforward, to the point. It looks like these women made their cases. They said, okay, this is what happened to us, and because this law is in place, we were not able to get the treatment that we needed when we should have gotten it, because of the unclarity, or because of the confusion and the how vague the law itself is. Okay, I mean, all the plaintiffs, I guess, testified so far. The state, however, their defense, in my opinion, was very questionable, from what I understood. Because of the fact that they were asking each and every one of these ladies the same questions, and number one, it's redundant. Number two, I mean, the defense that they're trying to do is basically they're trying to blow it off, as far as, okay, it's not the state's fault, it's the doctor's fault. They're trying to shift blame to the doctors, when in reality, SB8 was never clear. It was never clearly defined. To begin with, it was very vague with respect to the issue at hand. And they asked the same questions like, okay, well, did Ken Paxton tell you couldn't have an abortion? Did Governor Abbott tell you? Did anybody in the state tell you couldn't have an abortion? So it was kind of a ridiculous defense, if you ask me, in my opinion. In all honesty, if you think about it, and then the other part of the defense that they were talking about was the fact, oh, okay, well, they've already gone through it, so they're not going to go through it again, so they're not going to have any future damages or future issues with it. That's not necessarily accurate, because number one, a lot of these women that went through it, they may choose to have a baby again. And if they do and they get these complications again, they're going to very well end up in the same scenario. I mean, not that I'm saying they are. I mean, a lot of these women are probably turned off on the idea as it is. And who's going to blame them, But the fact of the matter is that they're actually they suffer damage. One of the ladies cannot have children anymore because of the scenario too. So, I mean, that's a long-term effect after the fact, and a lot of what the doctors presented in here, they made kind of a little bit of sense in the fact that saying, okay, well, they, why did these women have to get to this point? What does the state have to gain by it? It's a good question. I think that if the state takes it more apropos. This is what I don't get. Let me kind of jump the theme a little bit here, but this is what I don't get. If there's an issue of confusion as to how clear the law is, why wouldn't the state want to rectify it? Why fight it and say, okay, the law's fine, and obviously, if you were the state of Texas, you would want to be willing to work with these ladies and prevent, more of these scenarios from occurring. Am I right? But the assistant district attorney, she chose not to go that route. They're just trying to pawn the blame off on the doctors, and even the doctor said, well, there's really no clear definition other than if you break the law, you're going to pay $100,000 and lose your license. What doctor is going to want to take that type of a risk? It's a risk too great, In all honesty, I can understand why doctors would not be willing to perform the procedure if the risk is that great, And for the state of Texas to take the attitude that, okay, well, this is not our fault, it's the doctor's fault. And then something that was said that really, really got my attention was the fact that this was said by the plaintiff. It was that, okay, well, when other lawsuits were brought forth by providers and by other, they said, okay, they don't have standing to sue against this law. And now that women are suing because they're victims of the result of this, you're saying that they don't have the standing to sue. That makes no sense. And in that instance, my question to the state of Texas and to the lawmakers who came up with this bullcrap law, and that's why I call it bullcrap law, because it's like, and I've said this before, and many a time, I've said, okay, when these laws were put out shortly after Roe versus Wade was reversed, there was no thought whatsoever given to the logistics, medical logistics, that were going to be involved with this type of legislation. It was just made to prevent a treatment from being abused, from being used incorrectly. But the logistics for when it's medically necessary, like with the instance of these women that have gone through this scenario, there was no logistics, there was no thought put into these type of scenarios when the law was created. And I'm not just saying here in the state of Texas. It's plain and obvious that in every other state that has passed these type of laws, no thought was given whatsoever to these type of scenarios. And what's happening now is that it's coming back to bite them, because you're getting lawsuits everywhere that the law's unfair because of this and this. And to be honest, looking at it from a general perspective, I want to say that these laws were created to, and this is something that I was talking about previously in another video, which I'm going to go back and redo hopefully this weekend, is to basically create a forced culture in our country. In other words, the parties that be, in this case the conservatives, they're trying to create their own I want to say forced culture because it's not you understand our country, and I'm trying not to get too much into this because I spoke at length about it the other day, But basically, our country is a compilation of different cultures here in the U.S. And what the political parties are doing is they're trying to say, okay, we're going to create a universal, one size fits all culture. We're going to do away with abortion. We're going to do away with this. We're going to do away with that. You know, and they're trying to set a standardized culture. That's not what our country is about. And I know that a lot of the things that and I'm going back to the topic that I said I wasn't going to touch just yet, but basically it's because of them creating the standardized culture that they're rushing into creating these laws without really thinking of the consequences that would occur, in these certain scenarios, So that's all it is in a nutshell. And unfortunately, that's why we're getting these lawsuits about these specific laws, because there's certain things that should have been taken into account when the laws were created, but because these politicians, these conservatives, the people who create these laws, they did not use their thick skulls to think about the consequences. So that's where this is at. So, and for in this case, the assistant DA or the lawyers that are defending the law here in the state of Texas, the defense that they gave is utterly ridiculous. Because number one, there is no excuse for them not to have clearly thought out this law, well in advance before passing it the way they did. Number one. Number two, as humans, they should be willing to negotiate, to come to an agreement and say, okay, if it's not clear, let's fix this. There's no damage done to the state of Texas whatsoever. That's the way it is. I can't say more on the subject other than that now the judge is weighing her decision, and it's probably going to be a couple weeks before a decision is made, maybe sooner, maybe later. So in the meantime, we have to wait and see how this turns out. Well, I'm going to take a pause, and I'll be back in just a little bit to do part 3 this week in review. Stay tuned. It's going to get more interesting.